Yes. Thank you, Ronen and Ron, for inviting me to this. It was very interesting event. This is from the one presentation that I have. What I'll try to do is to use my 15 minutes to give you some insight into what I see as mainly as the opportunities and potential in Israeli economic cooperation with Jordan. Now let's see if wow, it works. Okay. I just thought when I listened to the previous presentation that we are almost 30 years from the peace agreement, so it's, time goes very fast. I start let's start with the beginning. Today most of us have forgotten what was in the beginning of this relationship, but the beginning looked very promising, very promising. In fact, it was even more promising than most people realized at that time. If we are looking from the Jordanian point of view, the peace agreement with Israel provided Jordan with really important, even vital economic fruits. First of all, the political and geostrategic stability. Political and geostrategic stability is important, of course, for political and strategic reasons, of course, but it's also vital, especially in the case of Jordan, for their economic health. In fact, Jordan, being a very poor country, almost entirely dependent on relations with surrounding countries, mainly with the Gulf countries, but also with international, with other foreign parties. Being geostrategically stable, thanks to a large degree to the agreement with Israel, was most important for Jordan's economic, for the Jordanian economy at that time. Again, most of us have forgotten, but at the early 90s, when Jordan came into this agreement, the Jordanian economy was in a very deep crisis, and the agreement, the peace agreement with Israel, was in fact it was a kind of trilateral agreement. It was American, Israeli, Jordanian agreement, and some may say that this is also the order of importance of the parties, especially from the economic point of view. The American part of the economic aspects of the peace agreement were the most important ones for Jordan. The U.S. Following the agreement, U.S. economic aid to Jordan jumped in all kinds of economic aid, and also some aspects of this economic aspect of the peace agreement were vital for stabilizing the Jordanian financial situation, which was at a very bad shape at the time. That was immediately after the agreement. Then came the next group of benefits, which lasted for almost a decade. In fact, if you look at the macroeconomic performance of Jordan from the late 90s up to 2007, for almost a decade, Jordan experienced the most rapid economic growth, around 7% GDP growth in real terms, which is very good. And this growth was export-driven. And the export and the increase, in fact, Jordanian export of goods jumped from $2 billion in around 1998-99 to 8 times this figure after in 2007-2008, per year, of course. And in fact, if you look at this was export, then of course similar increase was in export of services, in investment in Jordan, and in other aspects of other macroeconomic aspects. Large part, and in fact this trend started with a peace treaty, and then it continued based on other factors, but the starting point was the peace treaty with Israel. But then things became to turn into the negative. It turned much more negative. From the point of view of Israeli-Jordanian relations, from other point of view as well, but from the point of view of Israeli-Jordanian relations, in fact, by the end of the 90s, large part of almost all the promised fruits of peace were in fact failed. In fact, I put here a partial list of projects or activities that part of them were promised by Israel, part of them were expected by Jordan to happen, and all of these items listed here didn't materialize, and the outcome was a big disappointment and bitterness and a feeling of distrust by the Jordanians to the Israeli side. And that, in fact, and this, I use a kind of a strong word, but I think it truly presents. In fact, this disappointment poisoned the relations between Israel and Jordan. Of course, to this was on top of political issues and other issues, but focusing on the economic aspects, by the end of the 90s, the early years of the 21st century, in fact, the Jordanian public opinion, the Jordanian government, everybody, in fact, in Jordan became deeply disappointed with the relations with Israel. Now I'll jump 20 years forward, and let's talk about today, because we don't have time to go to describe all the stages in between. Today, since 2007, 2008, it's almost 15 years now, Jordan is experiencing very bad economic period. In fact, GDP growth, which, as I said, increased by about 7% a year in the first decade after the peace agreement, over the last 15 years, in fact, almost stagnated, and in terms of GDP per capita, it even decreased significantly. Export stagnated. Export of goods, which jumped from $2 billion in 1928 to $8 million in 2007-8, are the same now. If you look at the trade statistics of Jordan, export of goods are around $8 billion a year, as it was 15 years ago. Economic security of the population deteriorated. Real unemployment is very high.
Nobody knows.
Sorry?
What's the number? Nobody's knows.
Nobody knows, of course, because the formal numbers are irrelevant, because it says nothing about the real situation. I personally estimate real disemployment somewhere around 40%, maybe even 50%. I don't know what is your estimate.
We will see that later.
You talk about it later. Okay. Of course, this is a recipe for social and political unrest, which is waiting to erupt. It erupts from time to time, but if something significant will not happen, it's just a matter of time when this social and related political unrest will get out of control. Now, for the last few years, there are a set of new problems, new challenges, which are very dangerous. For water challenges, Jordan has for many years water challenges, but these challenges accumulate and get worse. Energy challenges, especially in times of high energy prices like today, like we have today, and all kinds of related challenges which are far above the ability of Jordan to solve or to even to handle it by its own. Here comes the potential of relations with Israel. This was true 25 years ago, but it is getting today. It's much more stronger. Let's say the potential much higher, much vaster. From the point of view of Jordan, Israel is an economic giant, just next door. Not only for Jordan, for other neighbors as well, but for Jordan particularly. Now, in cooperation with Israel, and I will demonstrate, I will present two demonstrations for this in two critical fields. Cooperation with Israel can be a game changer for Jordan. When I say game changer, even these two examples, which I'll show you in a minute, these two examples alone, according to my estimate, can bring Jordan from a negative GDP growth per capita to something around maybe 4-5% real per capita real GDP growth over the coming 2 decades. And these are only two examples, two very important examples, but there are more. Now, another thing which happened 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, are the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords changes the situation.
We can,
5 minutes? I'm in minus now or still in plus?
0, but okay.
0.
Take my 5.
Okay, 5. I see this is you're going great. 7 minutes, credit to everybody. Okay. The Abraham Accord changes the situation tremendously, and I'll now go to briefly to 2 examples, which each of them is a game changer, and combined and with some other things can dramatically change the economic situation of Jordan. One of these is in the field of transportation, and the other in the field of water and renewable energy. I'll start with water and renewable energy, which is already happening. In the Israeli public, it is amazing how such important events, goes under the radar of the Israeli, let's say, public opinion and also awareness of other people. About 6-8 months ago, there was an agreement, Israeli, Jordanian, Emirati agreement on a kind of a deal of solar energy, Jordanian solar energy, in exchange for water from Israel. This, in my view, this is the most important economic development in the Israeli-Jordanian relations ever.
Not the gas?
Not the gas.
Not the gas?
Not the gas. In my view,
no. Why?
I don't have time. If you give me some 5 more minutes, I don't have time.
You're black.
I don't have time. Maybe we do it afterwards in the discussion. What is this deal? This deal it goes like this. Jordan initiation of large solar power electricity power plants in Jordan, that this electricity will be exported to Israel, and Israel in return will export to Jordan water. Israel already supplies some water to Jordan, but the quantities are not very high. And this first deal is it's quite large, but it's a first deal. If once this works, in my view, there are good chances that it will work because it has strong economic logic. Once it goes, in fact, the horizon for this deal to an expansion of this deal will make Jordan a very large exporter of electricity to Israel, and Israel needs in the long term, Israel will have a shortage of electricity in spite of the gas in the long term, because the gas is, let's say, for 20, maybe 30 years. In the longer term, it will not be enough. And the cost of solar energy is going down. Today, the cost of electricity production by solar energy is already lower than gas, and it is going down and down. So this is from Jordan to Israel, and in exchange, Israel has large potential of producing desalinated water, which it can export to Jordan. Now, since Israel is not the only country in the region that has a shortage, that will have a shortage in electricity, if you look at the Palestinian Authority, they already have huge shortage of electricity. Egypt has huge shortage of electricity. Iraq has huge shortage of electricity. Not to mention Syria and Lebanon, when God helps and they will be rehabilitated. And Jordan can establish itself as a large exporter of electricity, and this can become one of the leading export products of Jordan. And of course, at the same time, the water problem of Jordan, which is a very big problem for Jordan, will be solved by by importing water from Israel. The second example, which is even has a larger economic potential, is what some people term as the land bridge, the regional land bridge from the Mediterranean Sea on the Haifa and Ashdod to the Gulf, to the ports, to the Emirati ports in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and to the Saudi ports in Dammam and the other Saudi ports on the Arabian Gulf, and also all along this line for Saudi Arabia, for Iraq, for other countries. This is the project which has been extensively analyzed and researched in Israel and in other parts of the region, and it's gaining more and more interest now. And now, because of thanks to the Abraham Accord, it is becoming politically feasible. It was not politically feasible until now. Now it gains political feasibility, and in fact, the Israeli government, the Emirati government, the Saudi government, all of them, and also the Jordanian government all of this government are looking into this, as well as business business entities, the leading business entities in the region, the large Emirati transportation businesses like DP World and Abu Dhabi Ports, and also on the Israeli side, the Israeli train, the Israeli Railway Corporation, the Ministry of... There is a lot of action around this, and I had the opportunity to do several in-depth analysis of this project over the time, and this, at least according to my analysis, and I got some validation on this from people, from some people in the region. This project, Jordan is going to be the main beneficiary of this project, because it will make Jordan, thanks to Jordan's geographical logistics, Jordan will become the hub of this transportation, land transportation system of the region. And according to my analysis, this project alone, once it develops to its it's implemented and developed and includes also train transportation, railway system, and some other elements, will also add something like 3 or 4 percentage points to the GDP growth of Jordan annually for something like decade or maybe more than a decade. I guess some of you think that this is a kind of a fantasy, but just this will be my last, and I will end with this. Just take into consideration that the development of the railway system in the region over the last 2.5 decades, in fact, made 75% of the railway system from the Arabian Gulf to the Mediterranean is already in place. In the UAE, you have this railway system, in Saudi Arabia up to the Jordanian border, and also in Israel from the Mediterranean almost to the Jordanian border. Only the part in Jordan, which is less than 25% of all this system, is missing. So this just 2 examples to demonstrate the potential. Thank you very much.